How would you maintain your army? When discussing the logistics of guerrilla forces, it is important to explain the varying topics. For example, there are two main ways to supply your forces as a guerrilla group: from a sponsor, and the more cheap and effective method from the operational area. Let's look over the options and see which ones apply best in which scenario. Before discussing the two options, what is logistics? Is it important? Well, to answer both questions, logistics is the driving force behind your army. Without it, you will not maintain your army. It is what is causing Russia to not gain any more territory in Ukraine and keeping the war at a standstill. It is what allowed the United States to maintain its military in Afghanistan for so long. Without logistics, your army won't have guns to fight battles. Without logistics, troops won't have food for themselves or the fuel needed to power vehicles. So it isn't, because without it, your enemy will walk all over you.
Yes, I got what I deserve.
Method A, outside backers. Getting your equipment from sponsors is probably the best case scenario for your forces. If given enough support from them, the only thing you would have to worry about is winning. Basic supplies such as food, clothing, and medicine will keep your army running without worry. With additional support, you could run your guerrilla force at maximum efficiency. These sponsors have the equipment necessary that make the vehicles and weapons to supply your army. They are where you will get your heavy vehicles, aircraft, or naval ships. But it is important to note that their money is important to them and will not hesitate to stop supplying you if they deem your cause unjust. For example, during the Cold War, the US stopped supplying other nations because their ideology didn't match America's. To get sponsors, you will first need a cause. Given you have a good enough cause, any nation on earth will gladly support you in your war. If it isn't a nation, then it will be your people, which brings us to the next section. Method B, by the people, for the people. Without the people, your beginning army will not be very good. Civilians who align themselves with your idea will try to help the best they can. Families can provide you with a meal or shelter for the night. People will sell you weapons and clothes for a discount if they wish to. Most of your army will come from young people who believe in your cause. My political science teacher said something that stuck with me since. Revolutions are won by boots on the ground. So it is important to remember that. Young people want a future they want, so they will support you in the early years, while an older person who has already lived their life doesn't really care, unless it's for their children. Some people will refuse to join your army, but will want to help. For example, a family man might provide you guys with food and shelter for the night and even offer you an old truck or rifle he has. These people are willing to help, but they have their priorities set elsewhere. While maybe not the most helpful, they will most likely be the ones who support you in terms of equipment. These people are known as auxiliary forces. There are requirements needed to keep your army moving. To enable guerrillas to live, they need food, clothing, shoes, shelter, and medical equipment.
Lips grow back?
To enable them to fight, you need combat equipment like weapons, ammunition, demolition gear, and communications equipment. You need these if you wish to have an army in the first place. You will also need sufficient transportation and a distribution network to provide certain equipment to each task. A medical system to keep the injured and sick alive is also important, as you can bring them back to the fight for additional manpower. Lastly, essential services such as the repair of shoes and clothing. This may not seem necessary, but try walking through a cold environment without clothes or a jungle floor without boots. It's not fun.
Hey, look, y'all really think he look like Steve Harvey? Huh?
You will need a command structure to distribute weapons and supplies to your army. The most obvious way to provide equipment is to just transport it by air, sea, or land. But that's difficult, especially with a limited fighting force. The best way to have equipment provided to your forces is to already have it there. It may seem dumb, but hear me out. There is a reason militaries across the world stockpile weapons, and you can do it too. You can have depots in your controlled territory guarded by your regular force. In the depots, you can package the equipment and hide them in civilian trucks, sending them into enemy land where they hopefully won't be targeted. You can then tell your guerrilla forces that 3 miles east directly from the town water tower, a civilian truck at 3:45 p.m. blah 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 on a third Thursday of the month will be there with supplies. This is an efficient method of distributing supplies, but it can be compromised quickly. You can also take from these stockpiles and make pre-packaged supplies. These will be packaged in one-man portable loads of 50 pounds. Each package should contain balanced items that can be used at a moment's notice. Remember that the goal is to have the packages ready for grab-and-go delivery. It is also important to know that these packages will be dropped off at caches and supply drops, so it is uncertain when they will be opened, making it important to make sure the items inside are serviceable when opened. You should also think environment. In the wintertime, you may want to package your supply drops with extra clothing. If you are operating in a mountainous area, perhaps some hiking equipment might be in order. If there are friendly villages nearby, you can provide your guerrillas with money instead of food, so they can purchase what kinds of food they want from the village. Overall, logistics change based on the operating area. The best word to describe a guerrilla force would be fluid, since everything has to adapt based on the environment. Hopefully, this fifth part has helped you learn as to ways guerrilla forces supply themselves. One really quick note, another good way to supply your guerrilla forces is to have emergency supply caches. Let's say there's an objective where you have to blow up something, I don't know. Before the operation starts, you can already have a cache in that area, so the guerrilla forces can start the operation, do what they gotta do, and if needed, they can go to the cache for extra stuff. Alright, that's it. I may not make another part, simply because this part took me 2 years. I have other interests instead of this, and I've lost interest in guerrilla warfare. Instead of this, you can check out my second channel, which has a lot more projects and stuff I'll be doing more regularly on. Goodbye for now, and thanks for watching.